This is a Flying Cow production.
There was a man named Worrell, Ernest P. Worrell. Let's celebrate this champion.
Paragon of virtue. Okay, well, hello everyone, and welcome to Around the Worrell, the Patreon exclusive podcast where we talk all things Ernest P. Worrell. I, of course, am your host, Clay Johnson, the Flying Cow himself, and here with me today is, of course, my co-host, the litigator, Lauren Collins. Lauren, how are you, sir?
Doing okay. It's been quite a journey, and interesting that we finally reached this end point here.
Yes, we are, as Lauren says, this is it. This is the final movie, that the final Ernest film. This is the end of our journey. I will say, at the end, I think we're gonna do kind of a quick, look back at kind of everything, maybe rank the films the way we see it, that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, this is the last movie. We are, of course, here today talking about Ernest in the Army. Ernest in the Army was released in 1998, and it was directed, of course, by John Cherry. And I see no music credit here, which I don't think there was for the last one either. Story by John Cherry. Let's see. And of course, it starred Jim Varney, as always, as our titular hero, Ernest P. Worrell, as well as some others, which we will talk about in just a little bit. But yeah, we are here to the final Ernest film, Ernest in the Army. And it's been a while since any of us had at least had much of a history with these films. I'm assuming that once again you had not seen this before.
I had not seen this before, although I am relatively certain I owned it on DVD.
Okay.
Yes, it also included on that Ultimate Ernest Edition
Okay.
set that I
Sure.
got out of a $5 bin or something one time.
Nice.
That I used for the previous episode for Ernest Goes to Africa.
Right.
In this case, Ernest in the Army was streaming, so I didn't have to break the DVD back out again.
So does that collection just have the later direct to DVD? What films does that one have in it?
Well, I mean, it only has 2 films, I believe.
Oh, and it's the last 2?
It's the last 2.
Wait, I'm sorry, and it's called the Ultimate Collection?
It is the
false advertising.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. No,
I was expecting at least maybe 5 films.
Yeah.
If you're gonna call it the Ultimate Collection.
I take that back. It is called. I was looking at another listing.
Sure.
But I have
Okay.
the Essential Ernest Collection.
No, I disagree with that as well. False
Exactly.
advertising. False advertising.
This contains Ernest Goes to Africa,
Uh-huh.
Ernest in the Army. Those are the only 2 films that are actually in there. The full-length films. It also has Ernest's Greatest Hits 1, Ernest's Greatest Hits 2, which, as you recall, were the ones collections of his commercials.
The commercials, yeah.
It then has Hey Vern, It's My Family album.
Right.
And Your World as I See It.
We didn't talk about that one. Is that
we missed that?
Yeah. Is that an Ernest?
It was one of, I think it was one of his one of Jim Varney's pre-Ernest special. When was this?
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. It's from 1994. It's a short.
Oh, okay.
It is it's yeah, the Ernest P. Worrell wiki says Your World as I See It. 40 stories of Ernest P. Worrell's family. This direct-to-video family-themed special had its DVD release as an extra feature on Ernest in the Army. And it's been on other DVD releases since then. I am not entirely certain how long it is from this. Let me see if I can find. It looks like it. Yeah, I don't know. It looks like maybe about half an hour, give or take.
Yeah, I'm gonna make an executive decision and say I'm gonna let it go.
Yeah, it's from 1990. Well, it says it's from 1990. Oh, okay. It must have existed as 1994, and then just
Okay.
only got a release on DVD later. I suppose.
Sure.
And none of this dating makes any sense.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it doesn't sound really huge or
Yeah.
anything like that.
For what it's worth, it's sort of hosted by Jim Varney, but he's not as the host of it. He's not in character as Ernest. He's in character as billionaire Astor Clement.
Interesting.
His sort of elite, bookish character.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna let that one go.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll have to just give that a pass. That's fine. But yes, this is the final film. Like you said, you hadn't seen it until this. I will say, I think somehow I watched at least a little bit of all of these movies. Now, like I said, I did not really remember any of the ones after Rides Again.
Yeah.
But all of these, as I have been watching them, I'm like, I feel like I saw this once, or I saw parts of it once, or something like that. So, I mean, again, I don't have like big memories to share or anything like that. It's more just like as I watch it, I'm like, this is vaguely familiar. But there you go.
The last film I got that feeling from was Ernest Goes to School.
Sure.
And again, can't place when I might have been exposed to it, but some of that just felt way too familiar. Something I've seen before.
Yeah, this looks familiar, vaguely familiar. All right. Well, what do you say we go ahead and get into talking about this film?
By all means, the sooner we start, the sooner we can finish talking about this movie.
Yeah, okay. So Ernest in the Army basically follows the story of Ernest, who, as always, who gets basically talked into joining the reserves by his good friend Ben, who then, after Ernest joins the reserve, promptly has a heart attack.
Yep. And exits the film.
And then, he doesn't come up again until later, when for some reason they fly him to the Middle East.
Yep.
After just having a heart attack.
Yep.
When the mission is over. Makes no damn sense. But he, joins the army.
The Army Reserves.
Exactly. Specifically the Army Reserves. But of course, there's some shenanigans and everything. The outfit basically gets, for some reason, assigned to be support for a main regiment. And
it's a UN mission.
It's under the command of Colonel Gullett.
Yes.
And there's also a news reporter that tags along. Basically, like I said, just giving you the nutshell. Eventually, both the colonel and the reporter go missing. Ernest goes after them in order to save them, and shenanigans.
Yes.
That's basically the plot in a nutshell. Help! I'm in this nutshell. How did I get in this nutshell?
No, you're right. There's an Arab warlord of sorts who's trying to invade the country that they're there to protect.
Yeah.
There is also bizarrely basically a James Bond villain / Dr. Claw.
Which is never sufficiently explained.
Nope.
As to what that is.
I will stirring, but
I will say, as Lauren mentions, there is a mysterious villain who is introduced. I mean, it's not like this film doesn't already have enough villains. Number one, you've got the as you say, the Middle Eastern warlord, a dictator. President for life, Almar Habib Tafuti, played by Ivan Lucas. Okay. We're just gonna let that one stay there. But yeah, and then of course, as I mentioned, there is a colonel who eventually is revealed to also be in on this plot, played by David Muller, who is 100% a South African actor. I mean, he's the only one in the film that has a distinct South African accent.
Mhm.
And I mean, it makes sense. They're filming this in South Africa.
Yeah.
I will say eventually it's revealed that number one, he does kind of team up or at least conspire with Tafuti at a certain point to get the reporter, but he's also working for this shadowy figure, but the whole shadowy figure thing is never really paid off.
Nope.
The most payoff we really get is to know that that's who the colonel is working for.
Yes. And
Unnecessary.
it's
Completely
interesting
unnecessary.
showing that they work for an organization called, like, they show a skyscraper and they work for FIT, Financial International Terrorism, if I believe was what they put as the chyron on the screen.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's like a Blofeld type bad guy with a white cap.
Yes.
I don't recall his name from the movie. According to IMDb, I think his name is Blowstrand.
Okay. Where? I see.
Yeah.
Honestly, there were a couple of times hearing his voice that I was like, is that Jim Varney? Because like once or twice,
Yeah.
it sounded vaguely like Jim Varney.
That would honestly make more sense.
Yeah, honestly, it would have made more sense if it was revealed that that he was playing a double role.
Jim Varney playing
And
that guy.
yeah, and then it would have been great to actually have a reveal and have that guy thwarted. But no, he's never revealed. He's never thwarted.
Nope.
So basically, that shadowy figure is still out there as a threat.
Yeah.
I mean, it's never even revealed to Ernest or anybody else that
Yeah.
this guy even exists.
Nope.
So I don't know why he's there.
Yeah.
It's really pointless.
Even the shooting of him is weird because he's not only in a dark room. They sometimes shoot him from in front of him.
Yeah.
But put a screen in front of his face that's unnecessarily there. It's like,
yeah. Well, he's in shadow and he's behind a screen. But it's a see-through.
Both. Yeah, exactly.
But it's a see-through screen.
That's what I mean. It's a see-through screen. You would think you just shoot the dude from behind. Like, you just shoot him from certain angles. You shoot the cat. Again,
honestly, he kind of looks like he's shooting the whole thing from Louis De Palma's Nest from Taxi.
Yeah.
It's like what is the point of this? Is he the dispatcher?
Yeah.
I will say what really disappointed me about that is that whole setup seemed really fun because we get in the early part of the film, Ernest basically setting himself up like a spy, like we talked about in the last film.
Exactly.
And I was like, oh, and now they're introducing this, as you say, Blofeld type character. This is really our big bad. We're going to get this interesting Ernest as a spy thing, and they drop it and do nothing with it.
Yeah. It's in a movie full of inexplicable things. It is the most inexplicable.
they don't even drop it though. At least the villain thing, they dropped the Ernest spy thing. Unfortunately,
no, you're absolutely right. The dude comes back,
bringing him back until we find out that the colonel's working for him, and then it's dropped.
Yeah.
It's like right after when you should have introduced him, they just decide to drop it. And it's like, what?
It turns out he's the mastermind, and then that doesn't matter.
No. I mean, it's not like I needed this film to be longer or anything.
Oh, no.
But still, it's like, I really don't get it, guys. I don't get why we're introducing this thing that actually has a lot of promise and then we just drop it. I just it's really frustrating. But yeah, so like I said, that is a thread that goes nowhere.
Yeah.
Um, I do want to mention, like we said, we are introduced to a friend character for Ernest, who here's something I didn't know. You know who plays him?
No.
The director.
Oh, did he?
That
Okay.
is John R. Cherry III.
Oh, okay. Who
Yeah,
played Ben?
yeah.
Oh,
At least according to IMDb.
well, what do you know?
Yeah.
Oh, you're right.
I
Yeah, yeah, he does. That says that. Yeah.
yeah, that I think that is so interesting that and his son Josh is also in this one as well.
Yeah, I saw that as well. Yeah.
He's Corporal Davis, which
Yeah.
I don't think we see a whole lot of him. I think
I
we see him in the first couple of scenes after Ernest enlists,
Yeah.
but that's really it.
Yeah. By the
Oh
way,
no. I think he's the guy that yells after Ernest when Ernest goes on his one-man crusade.
okay. Um,
But yeah.
Also, by the way, in terms of crew being in the film, if you didn't notice,
Mhm.
General Lincoln, who's a major antagonist throughout this film, is played by Jeff Pillars, who was one of the two screenwriters for this movie.
Oh, okay. Let me check this out because I didn't actually notice that.
Yes.
Who is the other one?
The other screenwriter is
Joseph DeTore.
yeah,
Okay.
he wasn't in the film. He hasn't done he only ever even has one other screenwriting credit.
Sure.
But
Sure.
no, Jeff Pillars co-wrote the film and appears in it as General Lincoln.
Right. Well, Jeff Pillars, as you said, appears in this film.
Mhm.
He anybody that listened or watched our
Ernest
Ernest
Rides
Rides Again podcast
Yep.
might remember the name Jeff Pillars
Mhm.
because he and Duke Ensberger were in that film as the Mighty Workboy guys. They make their return
Mhm.
in this film. And we'll talk about them in a second, but I do want to quickly talk about Ben, who, as we said, played by the director of the film. I think this is the first time he's put himself in one of his own movies, and at least in a prominent role. Anyway, I don't know. Maybe he was in the background at some point. I mean, I say prominent kind of loosely, like we said, he's the one that he kind of is the inciting incident and then quickly fucks off.
Yep.
Just he's there to get things rolling, and then he has a heart attack, and he's not there for the rest of the film. Knowing that he's the director, it makes a lot more sense.
It makes more sense. It's still a bizarre scripting decision.
Yeah. I will say though, in watching this, and I think a lot of it might just be the recent films, especially the direct to DVD ones. I was actually really glad to have Ernest have a good friend that, number one, we feel like we understand who he is.
Yep.
And number two is actually nice to Ernest.
Yes.
Because I feel like in the last couple of films, his friends or the people that he's around are actually kind of mean to him.
Oh no,
in one way or another.
I'll give you that. It is a nice change of pace that once again, Ernest has someone who's there who who may still think he's a screw up, but at least still likes him as a person.
Yes, and is still actually actively looking out for him. Honestly, I saw him as like a big brother type to Ernest, and I actually really appreciated that because I'm like, if there is any character in the world that needs a big brother figure to look after him, it's Ernest.
No.
So yeah, I
I'll
really
give you
appreciated that.
And for the first part of the film, I saw the benefit of having that.
Yeah.
I was not impressed. I did not know it was John Cherry at the time. The performance does not impress me.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's kind of just there. But
Yeah.
I think that he serves the purpose. He's not exemplary
No.
by any stretch of the
But
imagination.
and once he disappeared out of the film, like I it again, bizarre scripting decision because the
Mhm.
movie is lesser for not having been there as a character anymore.
Yeah.
Because it could use that again, someone in that capacity to be Ernest's big brother throughout the rest of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And also the scene that was one of the again, I don't have as many notes as I did for some of these early films, but
Sure.
the heart attack scene is bizarre in this movie just for how you can hear the heartbeat on the soundtrack. Then Ben collapses. Uh it's kind of played for a laugh when he collapses a little bit. The general runs out of
But the way that uh, John Cherry plays it, like I could see it coming, and I was like,
Oh
"That
yeah,
man's about to
no,
have
no.
a heart attack."
Again, you can hear the heartbeat in on the in the soundtrack. You know this
Right.
is coming. It's being foreshadowed, out the wazoo.
Audibly, but also visually.
Also
Yeah.
visually, you see him
But
like get
he
little
plays
kids.
it seriously, but you're right.
Yeah,
The movie kind of plays it as a joke,
but
which
what the general's reaction plays it as a joke in that moment,
yes.
which again, like you said, runs counter to how it's played when he collapses. Then the movie cuts to the hospital where it's again played like he's unconscious and like hooked up to machines.
Yeah, which
And
makes me think that there was some sort of disconnect
yeah,
because it's not like we can say, "Oh, the our actor just didn't know what the director was looking for."
yeah,
It's one and the same here.
yeah. And granted, we've seen Ernest mess with like one of the really good Ernest bits with Vern
Mhm.
even back in the days of the commercials was
Yeah,
Vern like having broken a limb or whatever, broken multiple limbs in the
right.
hospital, and Ernest is
Yeah,
still messing with him.
yeah.
That there's comedy to be found there, but here like he just kind of hurts the unconscious Ben in the hospital, and then Ben is just left. Like Ben disappears from the film
Yeah,
because
and
Ben had a heart
repeatedly
attack from
stabs him with a
it.
needle.
Yeah,
And then just forces it in him and says, "That's good," and goes. I'm like, that could actually kill him.
yeah. I mean, again, if the film wants to play it off as like it didn't kill him and he's fine, fine a scene or two later, again, one
Yeah.
scene, but no, he disappears from the film. You get the impression like Ben is
Ben
not,
might be dead.
Ben,
Yeah.
it's like when last we saw Ben again, he was unconscious in a hospital bed,
Yeah.
from a fairly severe heart attack, it would seem. But
Yeah.
yeah, there've been dark things in this film, but that was just unnecessarily dark and not funny.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No, I mean, look, definitely a lot of the, especially the later Ernest films, have definitely been, you know, going more to the silly side. Obviously, all of the Ernest films have always had an element of silliness, have always had an element of, magical realism a little bit. But
yeah,
the later ones have basically just completely run with this is ridiculous, this is crazy, anything can happen, whereas some of the earlier better films were and yes, I say this with a pinch of salt, a little bit more grounded. And yes, that even includes Ernest Goes to Jail, a film in which Ernest gets electrocuted and gets electrical powers
yeah. Well,
and flies around the room.
I
That was more grounded though than some of the things that happen in these later films.
true, and I maybe what I think you're trying to say here, and is that some of those early films at least had some more sincerity to them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Um.
There were things that were taken seriously.
Yes, and here's the
And there
thing.
really isn't in these, which honestly hurts
Yeah,
well, because it basically tells us there's no need to care about these characters because nothing really matters.
and I want to push back on that somewhat because I think there is serious stuff here, but like I think it's also not funny. It's like the film loses
Right.
track of like it's supposed to be a comedy. It can be
Yeah.
it can be at moments like a sincere and grounded comedy,
Yeah.
but it forgets that. One my first note here, honestly, is for the opening credits of this film, which apparently just completely forgot this is a comedy movie and involves just like battle wreckage in a desert with serious music playing over it,
Yeah.
which then gives us footage of people being taken hostages
Yeah.
by some hostile, forces by gunpoint, and then with like very serious voiceover on top of it. It's
Yeah.
like it took several until Ernest finally shows up in the movie. That could have just been out of some other war film.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, it's a little bit of a, and then the rest of the film proceeds like, the Ernest films of this era.
yeah,
So
exactly.
it's almost like you said, it's almost like it belonged in a different movie.
But it felt like it belonged, it felt like it belonged out of like Three Kings or something like that.
Sure. Sure.
And it bears very little impact on the rest of this film.
Right.
Why that was the decision to start this film, I have no idea.
No. No.
Honestly, the one funny thing I thought that came out of that, do I even have that up here at the top? No, it comes out a little bit later. Is I liked the voice in the voiceover a little
Okay.
bit
Yeah, yeah. No, I did too. I
because
mean, he's one of the guys that plays one of um the prisoners
yes,
later on.
exactly. Which
Yeah.
honestly gave me possibly my only laugh out loud moment in this entire movie was the second time we see the hostages and we're having the
Uh-huh.
voiceover. It's just
Yeah.
panning down the wall of the hostages, and when we
Yeah.
finally reach that one of the hostages is doing the voiceover we've been hearing, I
Yeah.
laughed out loud at that.
Wow, okay.
I like the non sequitur of it.
Sure.
Because you absolutely don't expect that guy's going to be narrating this film.
Sure.
So
Sure.
that I found funny, not in a normal Ernest sense, but in a slightly more
Right. Like,
random.
yeah, yeah, a random, like, that came out of nowhere
It
kind of
it
way.
it
Yeah.
it 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 feels like a more Monty Python-esque type joke to suddenly have
Sure.
like, one of these guys be the voiceover.
Right.
But yeah, the film is just filled with those more serious aspects. There are less of them in the latter half of the film, to be fair. But
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, honestly, the longer the film goes on, the more ridiculous it
exactly, it does.
becomes.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, I do want to briefly mention, like I said, there is a character here who is a reporter,
yep,
Cindy Swanson.
yep.
And wrong thing. But Cindy Swanson, um, I mean, honestly, she's kind of nothing here. She's a bit of a plot device.
Yep.
She actually is a bit of a love interest for Ernest, and
Yep.
actually is one of the only characters I've ever seen actually kiss Ernest
Yep.
in a film. Now, of course, they play it off as a joke because then his
Lips peel off.
lip skin comes off and grosses her out, which I get. But something that I found, number one, the character is played by Haley Tyson. And one of the first things that I wrote down when she came on screen is that her voice is actually very similar to Linda Cash. Was I the only one that thought that?
I didn't pick up on that,
You
but
didn't pick up on that. Okay. So I felt like she sounded very similar
yeah,
to Linda Cash. Now, obviously, her performance is much more subdued. While I think Linda Cash would have been more fun in this film, I don't think that it would have had the same tone that they were looking for this character. I
yeah,
think they wanted someone more subdued
yeah.
for this. I also wrote down Canadian because she definitely is. And I looked it up. She 100% is Canadian.
Yes, she is.
But here's the other thing that I discovered as I was prepping
I
for
just
this.
here.
I was this is the thing I told you I was going to tell you about, because she reminded me of Linda Cash, and I was like, that's so weird. And when I looked at just a brief bio of hers on IMDb, she is married to a man named Daniel Cash, who just so happens to be Linda Cash's brother.
Yep.
So the comparison, it works.
Yep.
I mean, they're not blood related or anything,
Yep.
but I'm just like, I think it's so funny that, I was like, this woman sounds like Linda Cash to me. Like, she comes off like a more subdued, Canadian version of Linda Cash, and wouldn't you know, she's Linda Cash's
sister-in-law. It is funny that after casting, having Linda Cash in several films, they replaced her as Jim Varney's love interest with Linda Cash's sister-in-law.
Yeah. Yeah, you almost wonder if maybe Linda Cash, they wanted her for the film, and she said, "Oh, I'm actually not available." You know who you could try?
Yeah.
My sister-in-law. She sounds very similar to me.
By the way, I'll say here, like, I'm not sure I'm familiar with his work, but man, Daniel Cash has a long filmography.
Yeah, no, I was looking at that too. Yeah.
He was in Aliens, even.
Yeah, oh yeah. Private Spunkmeyer.
Yeah.
Seems to be his first credit, at least on Wikipedia.
Huh. Lot of television.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, I mean, where do we want to go from here? Where's a good place?
Let's see. I mean, I want to kind of go through. I will say, like we said, there's the bit where our Ernest finally decides that he is going to join the army. And I will say they do this bit like right after he decides, and they make it sound like he's just decided to join, but he's already in his uniform. It's really weird. But anyway, it's him and Ben, and I believe that's the corporal played by Josh Cherry.
I think you're right.
And they have a brief little like army PSA where they basically break the fourth wall and talk directly to the camera.
Yeah, in my opinion, that was kind of like a Chuck and Bobby type moment.
Honestly, I found it. I mean, I didn't think it was amazing, but I found it kind of entertaining. It was one of the first things that I wrote down that I was like, that was kind of fun. Yeah. And they do this like rhyme at the end where they mean to spell out people, but they spell out P-O-P-L-E.
Yes.
And they're like, poople? Yeah, nothing's wrong with poople. And I'm like, actually, that would be popple.
It's like they were trying to it was almost like a barbershop type chord.
Yeah. I mean, it was weird. I'm not going to deny that, but there was something about it that I was like, this is entertaining. This is fine. I mean, maybe part of it was that it was the most entertaining thing I'd seen in the movie so far. Yeah. I mean, not to say that there aren't some, there are some decent Ernest gags in this. Not as good as some of the earlier films. Definitely more and better than Ernest Goes to Africa.
Yeah.
But, I do kind of still miss, the Ernest bits that we were getting in some of the earlier films. Like I said, this is 98. Unfortunately, he would pass only 2 years later. It's possible that, just the wear and tear was getting to him. Maybe, he just wasn't able to do the same things, or I don't know. But there are decidedly less gags in these last two Ernest films that kind of were bright spots to look forward to than there were in the previous films. There's definitely less of those in these last two. There were hardly any in Ernest Goes to Africa. There were more in this one, but just not quite, the quality that we're used to. But yeah, let's see. Okay. So like I said, the Mighty Workboy guys are back. They are playing much different characters in this. There's still a bit of a team. You've got Jeff Pillars playing General Rodney Lincoln, and Duke Insberger playing Barnes, the general's aide. And I kicked back on this whole depiction a couple of times. Number one, would it really be a general in charge of the reserves? Because it seems like that's the only division he's in charge of. And I feel like that's kind of a small thing for a general to be in charge. I mean, and yes, this general is depicted as, a simpleton, an idiot, but still, he's a general.
Yeah.
You would think that he would at least, be in charge of like a couple of different regiments or something. He's a general, but for some reason, he apparently just oversees this one reserve company. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. No, that's you're right. That makes no sense. That is also the least of my issues with this film.
Sure. Sure. Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But then, Duke Insberger's character, Barnes, the aide, sometimes it seems like he's on the general's side, like, trying to build him up in the press and things like that. And sometimes it seems like he's actively working against him. And I'm just like, pick a side. I mean, to be honest, I actually kind of enjoyed Duke Insberger's performance as Barnes. It was interesting at the very least because he comes off as smarmy, and whether he's working for or against the general,
He's at least playing a character.
Yes, exactly. He could be seen as kind of an antagonistic character, and I think he does that well. I just wish I knew what side he was really on.
Yep.
If he and the general are basically both just careerists who are there to push the general to get them both as far as they can, that's fine. That's still kind of a smarmy character. But if he's actively working against the general, that would be a different tact. So, which is it? Is he working? Are he and the general antagonists together, or is he actually the general's antagonist himself?
Yeah, again,
I don't know.
It's such a weak script. I mean, from beginning to end. I took note of it when we had two new screenwriters in the opening credits.
Yeah,
I wondered what this was going to mean for the film, and what it ultimately meant was that this was just a disjointed mess that literally from scene to scene did not know what kind of movie this wanted to be.
Yeah.
I mean, it's. I've talked to some of these films about like it felt like a first draft and it needed more drafts. Like this almost felt like just like different drafts thrown together from different iterations of making maybe some cases not even an Ernest movie. Again, like the opening stuff with hostages does not feel like it belongs in this film at all.
Yeah.
And again, the latter half at least kind of sticks to a tone for the most.
Yeah.
But again, we still have the mystery Blofeld dude keep showing up for no reason.
Yeah. I mean, I really wish they'd done something with that. Even if it was like a tease for this guy's going to return in later movies. I mean, obviously didn't happen, but
no, I mean, in some cases, like we had Colonel Gullet, who again is our kind of UN commander there for
right.
Film. Not only does he do a heel turn at the end and turn out to be like in cahoots with the bad guys,
right? Which honestly I saw coming a mile away.
Which that by itself is fine. It's a little weird that minutes before that happens, kind of, he's also abducted, kind of as part of a larger plot, abducted by his own companions and then freed. Just prior to that, he like actively tries to sexually assault.
Is assaulting Cindy. Yes.
Yeah.
Actively is trying to assault her.
Yeah.
Like to a very uncomfortable degree.
It comes out
and then she's immediately like tied next to him in a pole.
So
which was really uncomfortable.
Yeah, him being a sexual assaulter comes out of absolutely nowhere for that scene to happen.
I mean, they show that he is obviously like into her or whatever, but they can show him as like sleazy without like aggressively
grabbing her and trying to when she rejects him, like trying to force himself,
physically trying to force himself upon her.
But again, there's not really any payoff to that. Like they make him like basically,
Other than confirming that he is a sleaze in every area,
yeah,
that's really
which is
which
a weird.
I feel like we could have achieved that without pushing him that far.
Well,
I
that too.
mean, he
It's a
could
weird,
have just like leaned in for a kiss and she, pushes him away
but again,
and then they're abducted. That
weird.
would have been enough.
It's a bizarre thing to want to do to establish that this guy like is a little bit morally questionable. But if you want the surprise to come later that he's actually in cahoots with the bad guys, like
Yeah.
why would you
Which
want to spoil that?
yeah, that kind of telegraphs, oh, okay, he's an asshole. I
If
bet
you
he's working for the asshole.
Yeah, if you want your heel turn reveal to work, you can't preemptively just show the guy is also just like gonna force
Yeah.
himself on women.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a trope, but you want to make him seem like a good guy, so the payoff works.
Yeah.
No, again, it's messy. It's
Yeah.
that's sloppy. It seems weird to me.
Yeah.
Honestly, I thought that one of the I hate to say better, but one of the characters who didn't actively annoy me on camera,
Sure.
at least, was Ivan Lucas's President Almar Habib Tafudi. Um, I thought it was weird that he is it for 2 films in a row. We
Yeah.
have golf playing like uh
Oh yeah, that's
third place.
right. I forgot that the is it Sheik or whatever
Yeah, in
in
the last
the
film. Yeah,
in the last film, and both Middle Eastern characters.
both
At
Middle East.
least, I
This
mean,
one,
I will say at least this is not a guy and a white guy in brown face.
yes, this is at least someone of a unappropriate ethnicity.
He is. I mean, I don't know what his. Like I said, his name is Ivan Lucas, so I don't know if maybe he changed his last name or something, or if
I
he's
mean, he's
just
from
like,
South Africa.
oh, okay, okay, so
Yeah.
that, I mean, that's still not the Middle East, but I mean, it's better than again casting a white guy in brown face.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah, honestly, I I kind of I mean, I didn't mind him either, but I did find him kind of bland and boring,
Oh yeah.
especially as a villain. Honestly, I got a little bit more out of his sidekick.
Oh,
Um
his sidekick has more credits to his name.
Kibby?
Yeah, Kibby.
Yeah.
No. Kibby has he's had a decent career. In fact,
Sure.
he's done other stuff.
That's Farouk Valley Omar
Yes.
is the actor's name.
Yeah. This was one of his first credits, but
Okay.
he's I'm not sure there's enough here that he's like a working film actor, regularly, but he's done a bunch of stuff. He most recently showed up in 2 episodes of Raised by Wolves, actually. Huh? What do you know?
Oh wow, well there you go.
Yeah. So that's
Yeah,
something.
he's also from South Africa.
I think he was one of the 2 actors who actually has a Wikipedia page here. No,
Oh,
I'm sorry, I'm wrong. He does not.
I was about to say I didn't even see him on the Wikipedia.
No, he doesn't. I forgot something. I saw something about his name caught me earlier.
Sure. Sure.
I
Yeah.
think it was just that he had a photo on IMDb. That was it.
Yes. Yes. No, he does have a photo on IMDb, which a lot of the other actors in this do not.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Um,
honestly, I enjoyed his character a little bit more
Yeah.
than Tafudi.
Yeah.
But yeah. It's also, a low bar.
It is. It's a
It's
very
a
low bar.
pretty low bar here.
Um,
I will say something that I wrote down from the beginning of the film, and I'm just gonna mention this because within like a line, they made me think 2 different ways. Because number one, they establish that Ernest and Ben have been friends since childhood. And I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. Here's another reinforcement of the idea of the Worrelliverse.
Yeah.
And then they're trying to get him to join the army, and they'll say he'll be a leader. And he says, I was a camp counselor once. And I was like, are they actually trying to reference and bring into this Ernest continuity, Ernest goes to camp? Because if that's the case, I reject that this is where the Ernest goes to camp Ernest then went on to.
Yeah.
I utterly reject that premise.
Yeah.
I still hold fast to the idea that that is a different Ernest in
Yeah.
a different time continuity. He's probably running the camp by now. The second chance boys are camp counselors,
Yep.
and you know all other good things. I don't like to believe that he left the camp and is now, Ben's friend picking up golf balls.
Yeah. This is a different Ernest variant again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Again. Yeah. I mean, he might have, been a camp counselor like when he was a kid.
Yeah.
I'm good with that, but I do not accept that this is the same Ernest from Ernest Goes to Camp.
No, that's fair.
Yeah.
I really do not have much else to say here. Other than, I will throw out a nitpick that that annoyed me the first time I heard it, and
Sure.
later on I thought like maybe I misheard it, and then they kept coming up.
Yeah.
There's a missile at the center of this thing, which President Habib is trying to get his hands on, and
Pluton missile.
they keep referring to it as a
Pluton.
Pluton missile.
Mhm.
And for the good chunk of this film, I kept assuming, all right, I guess they just made up a term, so they wouldn't have to say what kind of missile this was. And Pluton sounded reasonable until we see it, and like written on the side of is plutonium. So
I didn't notice that.
there's plutonium on the missile, which for one thing implies this is a nuclear missile, which is well outside the scope of this thing. Like nothing's implied we're going to nuclear war here.
Yeah.
Also, it doesn't look like.
I mean, I will say I kind of assumed that it was some sort of nuclear, just the way they were playing it up. Sure. But I did not recognize that it actually says plutonium.
It says plutonium.
That's hilarious.
And then for a minute I thought like maybe that they do this as a joke. They continue to call it a
Pluton bomb,
even after the word
Pluton missile.
Yeah, here on screen.
Yep.
And I'm at a loss as to why. Just some disconnect between the props department and the script.
Yeah. All right. Well, let me go through my notes. Well, actually, there is a character that we have not even mentioned yet. And that is the young boy that joins up with Ernest once he goes to his deployment. And the young boy is also named Ben. I believe his name is Ben Ali. Yeah. And I will say that was actually, well, I didn't necessarily think that the boy's performance was great. I liked the idea of that relationship. I liked that they put a kid with Ernest, putting a kid with Ernest, a big brother with Ernest. These are great concepts that I'm glad that they actually recognized. Again, maybe not the most successful pairing, because like I said, kid wasn't stellar, wasn't great. Christo Davids is the actor's name, and I don't see that he's done much else outside of this. But I mean, like I said, I liked the idea of that. And I kind of liked a little bit of the relationship, the idea that this kid's alone. Ernest just lost his friend named Ben. They kind of, team up together. They call each other buddy, and buddies stick together, that kind of thing. It's an endearing concept. But again, the execution isn't necessarily the best. But yeah, let me go ahead and go through my notes here. Let's see. There's the bit where Ernest has the gooey gummy thing. I didn't even write down what he calls them, but it's like some big ridiculous name. And of course, the whole idea, like the general asks all the soldiers to come in, and they're all just milling about, and he's just like at ease. And I'm like, they weren't even at attention, dude. You gotta you gotta instill some sort of, I mean, look, I get it's the reserves, but there's still discipline, you know, in that type of setup. And Ernest in line has this box of the gooey gummy stuff, and they make a point of showing how, really sticky and everything that it is. Like, it's basically like gummy bears or gummy worms, any sort of gummy candy on like steroids. Like, it's, they're really hard to get out of your teeth, that kind of thing. And then that's when we're introduced to the Colonel character, and the Colonel appropriately tells him to get rid of the box. And of course, Ernest, being Ernest, just decides to, eat all of the gummy things. And then he says to get rid of the box too. And instead of throwing it on the ground or going to a trash can, he proceeds to eat the box. The gummy thing I thought was funny. I was like, this is kind of a funny Ernest shtick. I wonder where they're going to go with it. When they had him eat the box, I was like, that's a step too far. That's just a little past the line. I didn't need it. It's not funny. It's just so ridiculous that it's not funny, especially because he eats the box faster than he eats the gummy candy.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then of course that is followed by the scene where he, accidentally spits the entire wad on the Colonel's face, and the Colonel can't breathe, and it's ridiculous and gross. But yeah, let's see. Let's oh, did you notice they mention a president in this? Did you notice the name of the president?
No.
President Powell. So in this timeline, are they saying that Colin Powell became president?
I mean, that's not an unreasonable conclusion, I suppose.
No, I mean, especially during this time, that was what a lot of people in the Republican Party wanted.
Yep.
He, refused he had no interest. But I mean, they do later on. The general kind of compares himself to, now he just says Powell again. He doesn't say Colin Powell.
Yeah.
But I can only assume because Colin Powell was also a general. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. There's a lot of golf references in this film.
Yep.
Like, not just obviously Ernest works at a golf course and the villain is obsessed with golf, but the whole like mission is called Operation Sand Trap.
Yep.
There's just a lot of things like that. I wrote down that they're really into gooey effects for some reason, because outside of the gummy gooey things that he eats, there's also a scene where he identifies a jellyfish and then has to do push-ups over the jellyfish and then gets gooey stuff from the jellyfish all over his face, which that's not how jellyfish work. Again, the idea of some decent Ernest gags, but they're just not landing.
But before we get away from the gummy thing again, I wanted to say that part of me thinks that there's the root there of a better Ernest gag.
Yeah. Like I said, they're giving the idea, but the execution's not there. And usually Jim Varney can pull that stuff out, but for some reason it's just not landing.
No. And part of what irked me there too is it once again reminded me that there are various ticks of John Cherry's direction I do not like. And in that scene in particular, like the sound that they were putting on in the score of the sound of Ernest eating the gummies, nope, I found disgusting.
No, the majority of the direct-to-video films use sound in ridiculous ways.
Yeah.
The sound effects are usually way over the top, and it's like, look, I get that you guys are trying to make a silly, goofy comedy film, but there's a line at which it's so ridiculous that the audience can't accept it anymore.
Yeah.
And those sound effects very often are the thing that pushes it over the edge.
Yeah. Cherry also, like, as I'm sure you've noticed, really loves certain close-ups of Jim Varney, which are, almost disorientingly close up, and he uses those a lot with the gummy scene.
Yeah.
I also want to say, in terms of, like, again, the root of a better idea could have been executed better. Well, for one reason, it's like, I think the gummies are introduced for the first time in the very previous scene.
Yeah.
And then we have the scene with all the gummies, and then they disappear. It's just like it's just a really sloppy setup and payoff for that joke.
I mean, I honestly wouldn't have minded the quick setup, because it is at least established in the scene previous. It's not like established very first in that scene.
I mean, heck,
if it had been a better payoff, it would have been fine.
I don't know. I think I would have minded less if, like, there was no setup for it. If he just sort of shows up eating candy, it's
sure. Yeah, he didn't have to. I mean, really, he just offers it to Ben. That's really the setup for it. And also, they established that they're really gooey and gummy and hard to remove.
Yeah.
Which I guess, I mean, I don't know that was completely necessary. I think maybe they were like, well, if it's going to get stuck all over the Colonel's face, we need to explain that these are more gummy than usual. I mean, number one, it's not a good gag, so you could have just done without it in the first place.
Yeah.
But I was expecting it to more just have an issue, like the Colonel asks him a question and he can't answer because his mouth is full of goo. Something like that. And then he could have, played off like, why are you not talking? Why are you not answering me? That kind of thing, that would have been, and then Ernest has to do some kind of physical comedy thing or whatever to get out of the situation. But to make him eat a box and then spit the stuff all over the Colonel's face, it just is too far, and it was not funny.
Yeah, I mean, I could sit here for the next hour and I don't mean like what I don't think. I feel like nitpicky plot problems with it. Just holes. It's just that unnecessary decisions that, like, again, feel like first draft ideas that should have been cleaned up in subsequent drafts. For example, like Cindy Swanson. I mean, I'm sure she's a lovely person, but, like, the performance is flat. But
there's not much to it.
There's not much to it, but also, like, for whatever reason, like we said, the film makes the decision to make her a reporter who then, like, secretly embeds herself with the military and gets through. I don't know why any of that's necessary. We had to devote like 2 or 3 scenes early on to establishing that she's a reporter, and then trying to sneak her way in.
And then it is immediately counteracted with the fact that she's just actively walking around the base as a reporter with a press pass. I'm like, she's a stowaway. She wouldn't have a press pass.
No.
You have to be given press passes by the people that you are working with. She did not make an agreement to work with them. She did not have a press pass.
You can just make her,
and nobody asks how she got there.
Exactly. She could just be accompanying press.
She disguised herself as a soldier to get there, and then immediately takes it off when they arrive. Like, what the hell?
Again, these are the alternatives they could have discussed in breaking the story. One, you could have just, like, not have her sneak along, just have her just be an embedded reporter. Less effort, less time to have to devote to this, and less, subterfuge.
We didn't need it. It's not like her disguising herself pays off. So
there's also, like, it's not even necessary to the story that it has to be a reporter, really. Like, she could just be someone else, who's deployed with them. Like,
I mean, I think a reporter does make sense. I think that they should have, because it does sound like an interesting story. A reserve unit gets sent into, and I think that, and also the idea was that the Tufudi wanted basically press coverage, so bringing in, but they didn't use her really for that.
No, that again.
So it would have made more sense.
They'd use her for that,
Yeah.
But yeah,
If they had, yeah.
if you're going to have him kidnap her, there needs to be a justification for it. Again, it's just all
Again, ideas with some promise,
no,
just poorly executed.
yeah. The film
But
is just slapdash. Everything in this script is slapdash.
yeah, yeah. Again, I swear, especially for these later ones, they just wrote and maybe did a second pass and then did it.
Here's the thing. I'll at least say again. I'm weirdly going to compliment Ernest Goes to Africa here. There at
Wow.
least feels like there's generally a through line for that film. Like it at least feels like one coherent, like there's one major thread running through that. This
Mhm.
feels like it's almost been like three different movies mashed together.
It does feel a little cobbled together. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, like we were discussing, like there's this weird spy international terrorism angle that's just
Mhm.
utterly unrelated to everything else that's going on.
Yeah.
A bunch of the other setup for the first part of this thing does not matter. Ben is introduced as a character and then abandoned. All the hostages stuff where the voiceover is coming from, I technically that pays off, but it again does not matter
No.
in the big picture, except I suppose we finally turn out the voiceover narrator is also Ben's like African Ben's dad.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I mean, from the beginning, they are setting up the idea that an American is the promised American savior. Again, we're in the whole white savior
yeah,
storyline, which I'm not a big fan of anyway.
no.
So
But even that feels secondary to Ernest saving Cindy and also Ernest like stopping Tafuti from
it
getting the
it
bomb.
is
Like,
it's never a an important thing for Ernest.
no,
Ernest never intends really. He just on his way out is like, "Oh, hey, these people are here. Here, I'll open the door for you." And that's
yeah. No, we're
yeah,
told a couple of times that like there's some prophecy that someone's going to come.
right.
Literally, no one in this movie cares about or even knows about this prophecy, other than like the hostages who no one ever really interacts with.
Well, and I'm wondering who was this prophet that had this prophecy? Was it just Ben's dad in the prison cell that was like, some white American's gonna come save me?
Yep,
Prophesied.
yep, yeah. No, we uh,
Consider it prophesied.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, there's some other silliness where Ernest makes pancakes and he mixes in um tank patch. And I will say the one positive thing about that, again, this is some earnest gags that I feel like in most of the previous movies actually could have been entertaining.
yep,
But something about the way that they do this, it's not great. I think it's kind of funny when he actually tries to eat one.
yep.
That one's kind of funny, and then he drinks motor oil, which he never really reacts to the motor oil, so it's
He
like
doesn't weirdly
he
no.
might as well have just had a regular drink because the only reaction we're getting from him is this giant piece of pancake metal in his mouth. I will say though, on a positive note to that whole thing, those pancakes look delicious.
Yeah,
Obviously, they're not, but
no.
they look great.
I made a note about the pancake scene because that is again that felt like it had the germ of a better idea there. It kind of works a little. Honestly, in my opinion, works better than most of the other comedy in the movie.
Sure.
That's a low bar,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
it's at least the kind of comedy I would expect from a movie called Ernest in the Army.
Yeah.
Because um with that premise,
Mhm.
I was expecting this to be sort of a series of like private snafu type escapades. Something like basically Gomer Pyle. Just
Right.
Ernest is a doofus in the army. We're going to watch Ernest just get into hijinks as like an incompetent,
I was
like
gonna say I could have
low
watched a
level.
couple of shorts about Ernest
Yeah,
being a private in the army.
I mean, you could basically string those together into a movie. That would
Yeah. Yeah.
whether
Just
you want to make him,
some shenanigans.
yeah, basically
Yeah.
you establish him kind of like it did here. You establish him as a private who's given like these low level jobs and he keeps screwing them up. That's your
Right.
premise for the movie. And then if you need to give him a third act climax, he can do something to save somebody.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somehow, frankly, the better idea there is somehow his platoon ends up in trouble and he, the doofus, has to somehow save someone.
Right. Yeah.
Saves us the trouble, the love interest, and all that nonsense too. But
Which I mean, I was glad that he finally got a love interest that actually kisses him. But yeah, the problem is she's nothing.
she's also nothing.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Ernest making terrible pancakes is at least the closest thing this movie offers in the spirit of Private Snafu hijinks from Private Ernest P. Worrell. He has to make them. They are terrible. They are terrible in a unique and funny way, where somehow they're inexplicably like heavy. Like no one can handle these pancakes.
Right.
And
I will say
I also appreciate that the pancake pays off. That is the what.
Yes, I liked that about it too.
It is set up. He puts it in his pocket, and it pays off down the line in the movie.
It ends up being the thing that ultimately, gets to Foodie.
Yep, exactly.
But yeah. Let's see. There's a bit that they go back to a couple of times where basically this whole situation is being reported on by a news anchor for, I believe it's called INN.
INNI.
Oh, INNI. Okay, INNI. And it's like he's like a British anchor. And was it just me, or did most of those in-studio shots of him look like they were shot like in the 80s?
Oh, yes. Yeah, it did.
Like the video quality looked like throwback. Like it looked like it was stuff that was literally shot in like the 80s or early 90s. Like it, and I was just like, that's weird because it's supposed to be taking place the same time as this is. Why does it look so much older?
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting. Let's see. Oh, there's a bit where Ernest goes just walking off into the desert, and he's very hot and tired, and decides to, he's got a canteen obviously strapped to him. I'm like, dude, use the canteen. So he finally gets the canteen, opens it up, drinks a little bit, and then spits it out, and then pours out what looks like muddy water. And I'm like, oh, did somehow sand get into it? And then he reveals that no, he put chocolate milk in his canteen.
Yep.
Which I will say sounds like a thing Ernest would do. But the idea of sour chocolate milk is so gross to me, I couldn't find it funny. It was just, I just wrote down chocolate milk and canteen.
Yep.
Ew.
Yeah.
So gross. So gross. Let's see. Oh, here's the thing. We talk about promising ideas that don't pay off or aren't executed well. The first time that they reveal the Pluton missile, at least the full thing.
Yeah.
Did you notice on like the back rear or side of it, there is a giant fuse attached to it?
No, I didn't.
And I kept expecting, I was like, oh, please tell me that they're gonna light that fuse at some point. Because that's not how a missile works.
But like a giant Acme rocket from a Wile E. Coyote.
Yes, and it's just got this giant white fuse on it that like goes off down into the ground. I'm like, please tell me. And they never lit it. They never used it.
Not catch that.
Yeah, I mean, at one point the missile does take off, but it like crashes like 10 feet away and doesn't go off. I mean. Good thing, because it would have just nuked them all. Movie over. No wonder this was the last Ernest movie.
Yeah.
They nuked him in the end. But yeah, I will say you mentioned that you had one laugh line. I actually had two.
Yeah.
Number one, there's the bit, when he first finds oh, now I can't remember her name. Cindy. When he first finds Cindy, he goes to the tent. He opens the flap of the tent and is like, "Oh, good," and then closes it back up, and then immediately takes a knife and slices a hole in the tent right next to the opening to break it. And I was just like, it's ridiculous, but that's one of those great Ernest gags that, like I've said before, Jim Varney was capable of taking old gags that would have been tired
Yep.
for most people in most movies and make them seem unique. That was one of those for me. The other one was the whole, and I'm sure I've seen this in another movie, but the whole thing with the bullet, where he's like, they say every man has a bullet with his name on it. So I've got mine right here. Look,
Yeah.
I wrote my name on it, and I always keep it right here. That way I know he doesn't have it. I'm just like the way that he did that. Again, I feel like I've seen that in a bunch of Western, I mean, taken a little bit more seriously, but the way that he played it as a gag, I just really enjoyed, again, those were like the two biggest laughs that I had in the whole thing, and they're a little silly,
Yeah.
but at least it made me laugh. Let's see. I think, I mean, there's some silly things like, they have vehicles that were obviously brought out there to work in the sand, designed all wrong. They're driving around in tires. Of course, they would be using treads in the desert. They get stuck. Of course they do, because those aren't the vehicles that are supposed to be out in the sand. Let's see. Oh yeah, I wrote down that they all of a sudden Ben is here. We don't need him here. He just had a heart attack. He needs to go home. But they flew him out anyway. The other thing
needs a lot more Ben or no Ben. Like it's a weird compromise to have him in like the first 15 minutes in the last.
I mean, like I said, I liked his presence in the first bit. I think that it was.
I'm fully in support of more Ben, but
Sure.
it's introducing him and writing him out of the film.
I think
don't want any service.
I honestly didn't mind, because the way that they did it, I think made sense. It gave kind of Ernest a something to live up to, kind of thing. I don't think, I mean, we definitely didn't need to fly him out there. If we brought him back at all, it should have been like a phone call, or Ernest goes to see him after they get back, something like that. Just a quick, like, to establish that he's alive, number one, or, or that could have even been done in dialogue, something.
If you're still going to introduce Ben as a friend in this movie, he needs to be in more of this movie. He should at least make it overseas with them, and then he can at least be laid up.
Sure. I felt that it was adequate just setting him up as Ernest's friend and kind of the inciting incident of the film. I didn't have a problem with him being gone for most of it. I thought it was weird the way they brought him back. That was really my biggest thing with that. But my last note that I have on here is, we mentioned the fact that, we've got the general and Barnes.
Yep.
And at the end of the movie, and it really comes out of nowhere, because there's not a clear, like, he just did this, or he just told the general this, or anything like that. Just right at the end of the movie, the general looks at Barnes and says, "You're fired." And I was like, I'm not saying that you shouldn't hot fire him, but we were given no buildup for this. Yep. There was no, "I'm sick of your shit." There was no, he his whole shenanigans of trying to work against you were revealed or anything like that. Is just like, you know what? This guy kind of annoys me. You're fired, Barnes. It was just silly.
Yeah.
It's just like, I'm not saying that you shouldn't fire him, but I need more of a reason. What are you're gonna have to write this down in the paperwork. What were your reasons for firing Barnes?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's really about it. Not a whole lot else to say about this. And I mean, you've been done for a bit. So I'm
Oh, yeah.
assuming you don't have anything else.
I got some other stuff I can put in the final comments here, but there's
Sure.
nothing else I need to spend time talking about. No.
All right. Well, then let us go ahead then and move on to our moment. These are, of course, the your favorite and or most interesting scenes from the film. So, Lauren, what is your moment?
Okay. I want to say up front, there were a couple of like basically one-liners. I
Mhm.
liked a couple of, I didn't laugh. I think the only thing I laughed out loud at, which
Mhm.
honestly is rare for me in a movie,
Sure.
was the voiceover reveal. But there were a couple of lines I did like and did find funny.
Okay.
One of which was between General Lincoln and Barnes when I believe it's General Lincoln is seeing Ernest and asks Barnes, says, "Have him flogged," and Barnes responds, "We can only do that in Singapore, sir." Um,
That made me chuckle as well. Yeah.
that was funny. Again, solid joke, not great, but for this movie, it's one of the
Yeah.
top 5 jokes in that movie.
Yeah.
And the delivery of it was very good enough. It was fine.
Mhm.
Also, that was nonetheless not my favorite joke. My favorite
Okay.
joke, I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure what it means exactly. I'm not sure. I feel like there's a pun here that I'm not getting. Nonetheless, the setup and the actual delivery again from Jim Varney. His response very nicely timed. It functions as a joke. When he's talking to Cindy and he's being nice to her, and she asks, "Are you a mirage?" and he says, "No, Southern Baptist."
Yeah.
It's like I like that. I'm not sure what a mirage like what we're supposed to take
Yeah.
the other term, but no, the response that he's not a mirage. I'm Southern Baptist.
Yeah.
Regardless, those are just a couple of lines I found funny. For my moment in terms of my favorite moment in this film, it's going to be when the film ended, and not in. I've chosen to say it that way because that is funnier than what I actually mean by that, which is my favorite moment in the film. To be quite literal, is the last scene in this film.
Okay.
Um, it's just you know, uh,
Yeah.
better setup to say as the
Sure.
film.
Yeah.
Which is at the very end, we get again a little bit of voiceover. Ernest isn't on screen. It's just the young Ben, the male, the kid sidekick there.
Yeah.
Um, sitting, and the voiceover tells us that he goes on to be president of Azeria. I think it's the name of the country, something like that.
Yeah. It's a made up
It's a
country.
made up country. Honestly, I like made up countries in my fiction. So that's fine.
Yeah. It makes me
Um,
feel a little less weird about what they're saying about the countries.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it says that he goes on to be president, and that in each of the buildings that that are in his nation, there is a small inscription somewhere that says, "Stick by your buddy." Know what
Know
I
what I
mean?
mean? Yeah.
And what I was saying earlier about how these latter Ernest films seem to be missing, this film especially, missing a lot of sort of sincerity that Ernest film has. That
Yeah.
is a nice little sincere moment. I liked it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. And yeah, there are some sincere moments with the kid, which is like I said, why I like the idea of him kind of attaching to Ernest.
but
I've always said Ernest plus kid,
yeah.
good combination.
And it's a sweet, sincere, quiet moment there at the end of the film. It works for me.
Yeah.
Even though I slacked off in attention enough during this film, I don't remember the scene it's calling back to clearly.
Okay. Sure.
But and it's kind of nice considering that this was the last Ernest P. Worrell film. That is the last beat that we get in the last Ernest film. Is stick by your buddy. Know what I mean?
You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah. It's not bad. Not bad. All right. Well, mine, yeah, I've mentioned the few things that I actually thought were interesting or funny. The Army PSA is bizarre, but in a fun way. And then, my two laugh lines, the tent gag and the bullet scene. I think I'm gonna go though with the bullet scene because it is kind of it's a little scene
Yeah.
between him and Cindy, and it's a nice scene between him and Cindy. Cindy's not really doing a whole lot, but she asks him, or she kind of engages with his whole, thing about the bullet and then, plays it off like a gag decently, which, was okay. But yeah, I think that's going to be my moment. So let us then move on to the Nelby Award. This is, of course, the award that we give out to our favorite and or most interesting character in the film. Lauren, what did you get for this one?
Um,
Yeah, I'm thinking you had as hard a time with this as I have.
this is tough. This is
Yeah.
tough. All right. So, I'll tell you who my contenders are here.
Okay.
Who at least are at. Once I eliminate the folks I definitely don't want to give it to. This is
Sure.
at least like who was left, who's somewhat in the running if I got to pick somebody.
Yeah.
One is Jeff Pillars as General Lincoln.
Okay.
I don't I don't really enjoy the performance, I suppose.
Sure.
Tell how much I'm hedging on all
I,
this.
I was about to say he's so goofy that it's ridiculous.
He's so goofy, it's too much, really.
Yeah.
But I did kind of like one beat where someone actively comments on his voice, like as being an interesting voice for General.
Yeah. They say something like, "I like his voice" or
Yeah.
something like that, and it's like,
It's a good comic role, I guess, for an Ernest movie. It's a weird choice for the general in this kind of film. Again, for a private snafu film for the
yeah. And look, I get the idea of making these higher ups kind of goofy, but
Yeah.
I can in no way believe that this guy became a general.
No, I can't. And again, it's a weird choice for this kind of film. You want the higher ups to be more of a stick in the mud who can then be a source of embarrassment and ridicule.
Right.
Who need to be brought down a peg,
Right.
through Ernest shenanigans. And Lincoln is already a doofus from the beginning. So
Yeah.
Pillars is doing what he has written for the character. So he's giving a fine performance for what he's written. I don't like what he's written. Exactly. So
Yeah, that's right. And he was one of the writers, so he
right.
did write it. Yeah.
He's doing what he wants, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, crud, this is tough. Like you mentioned, the Farouk Valley Omar doing his Kibby, he's fine. He's there. He's doing his thing. I got no complaints.
Yeah.
I kind of almost by default here feel like I need to get. I'll say one more just to
Mhm.
drag this out. There is a bit player early in the film.
Okay.
Cindy Swanson is interviewing a Mr. Beetleman,
Oh,
who
yeah.
has a bunch of beetles.
Yes.
And I don't like the way the scene's written. I feel like it introduces the character and then immediately disposes him and whatnot. There could have been a funny beat there with like this weird nerd who's obsessed with beetles.
Yeah, and they show a little bit of
show a
it.
little bit of it. I feel like
Yeah.
that could have
I
been
feel like a lot more of that scene exists and it was
Maybe.
just cut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing is, I wanted more out of Mr. Beetleman because he seemed like a goofy throwaway character.
Sure.
And it wasn't.
Yeah.
Ultimately, and this damning with faint praise here. I don't know. I feel like I almost have to give it to Ivan Lucas as President Almar Habib Davoudi.
Okay.
Simply because, again, the role is underwritten. There's not an awful lot there.
No.
Nonetheless, despite the fact it's underwritten, Lucas is kind of delivering on the assignment. Again, I kind of said this with one of the bad guys from Ernest Goes to Africa.
Sure.
I feel like he's tuned in right to the person who needs to be the bad guy in an Ernest movie.
Yeah.
He's hitting kind of the right balance of like goofy and threatening.
Mhm.
Like he's not overdoing the like our Blofeld dude who's just out of a different movie entirely. Like
Yeah.
he's not being an absolute doofus like Lincoln.
Yeah.
He's not being an overly serious bad guy. He's he's hitting the sort of right bad guy balance at least.
Yeah.
So is it a well-written role? By no means. Is Lucas knocking it out of the park? I want to see more of the character. Not really, but he's delivering what the role needs at least. And I wasn't annoyed when he was on camera. So
Okay. All right. All right. Well, yeah, I mean, honestly, I had a hard time with this too. I often come in with at least a few ideas, and I'll be honest, I'm still kind of debating it, but I think I've got my pick. Um, as I was watching, I really kind of wanted to pick John Cherry as Ben because I like the tone that is set with him. But as you pointed out, the performance itself isn't stellar. It's just kind of a good, like I said, it presents something that I want for Ernest.
he delivers his lines, but his performance is flat.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I don't think that a whole lot more was required, but also, he does, disappear, and I mean, he's kind of mentioned throughout the rest, but uh, it wasn't enough to really, make me ultimately want to give it. I also, I mean, I picked the opposite sides of the ones that you chose. You chose the general. I'm nominating Barnes
That makes sense. You had nice things to say about him earlier.
because Barnes, uh I, while yes, he's a slimy kind of unlikable character,
Yeah.
but he's very interesting.
Yeah.
Um, you know, uh but I ultimately think that I'm actually going to give it to Kibby.
Sure.
Which
It's the other
I,
sidekick in this movie. Yes.
yes, yeah. I mean, like I said, there's not a whole lot from him.
Yeah.
But there was never a point at which I was like, "Oh, that was too much. Oh,
Yeah.
that was weird."
Yeah.
Or it was like every time I saw him on screen, it was like, "Okay, this guy's having fun."
It's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, this guy is somewhat entertaining. He's having a good time. He's being a little goofy, but not so much that it annoys me. So I think it's funny that my two, my nomination was the opposite of your nomination or the counterpart.
Sidekicks of my
The counterpart,
Yeah.
and my ultimate pick is the counterpart of your ultimate pick.
Fine.
So there you go.
Yep.
We're hand in hand there. All right. Well, then it is time, Lauren, to ask the question, the most important question, the question that Ernest himself never stopped asking. And that is this, Lauren, when it comes to this film, Ernest in the Army, do you or do you not know what he means, Vern?
No, I do not know what he means. No, I've given prefaces to some of these other movies to answer this question in terms of I have a general sense of the better germ of an idea there.
Right.
That it was just poorly developed and need more drafts. But like I said, this thing is just slapdash and
Yeah.
just a total train wreck as far
Yeah.
as I'm concerned. Like there is, like I said, I think material for an Ernest in the Army movie,
Yeah.
which this
Agreed.
movie barely touches on. Like
Yeah.
they went such an entirely different direction, which again just feels like combination, like parts of it just feel like from other non-Ernest movies entirely.
Yeah.
It's an absolute train wreck of a film. And it's sad this is the way it had to go out. I honestly didn't think it could get worse than Ernest Goes to Africa. But it somehow it did. At least in terms of maybe it's recency bias, maybe because I watched it literally hours
Okay.
ago, and it's still sticking with me.
I was about to say it seems like this one actually like somewhat pissed you off.
This one broke me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
See, okay.
and I'll tell you what, I didn't get to say this earlier, so I'll put it here, which is
Sure.
that I think I had seen I've mentioned Nathan Rabin's reviews from Ernest movies before, and I think I read him. I'd avoided reading the Army one before watching the movie and before now.
Right.
I do think he'd mentioned in there somewhere about the latter films getting a little racist, and I wasn't sure what this one was going to do because last one was Ernest Goes to Africa. What could this one do? And nope, this one somehow managed to do it in some ways earlier in the film, and bothersome. Like,
see, I actually didn't feel like this was as bad as Ernest Goes to Africa.
I mean,
Are there some problematic things in it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but I didn't think it was nearly as bad as Ernest Goes to Africa.
There's nothing quite as universally bad as the tribe from the end of Ernest Goes to Africa.
Yeah.
Which is hard to beat.
Yeah.
But no, when Tafuti is introduced, he literally introduces himself as the leader of all true believers. It's like there's some really ugly anti-Islamic stuff going on in this movie.
Well, and this was 3 years before 9/11.
Yeah. So it was ahead of the curve on that. Great job.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, and also maybe it was just because partly I went into Ernest Goes to Africa expecting this isn't going to go well. I tempered against this kind of stuff. Going into Ernest in the Army, it's like, nope, this is a lot more problematic than I expected. Just a random army comedy movie to be.
Right.
Because it doesn't need that at all. Again, like I said, it just needs Ernest screwing stuff up. It does not need foreign intrigue. Yeah. So I forget where I was going with that, but no, the film's a mess.
I will say comparatively, I definitely liked it more than you did.
Yeah.
Now, is it good? No. No, it's not. It's not a good film. Do I know what he means? No, I don't. There were points at which I thought, maybe I can be mixed on this. I even wrote down this is somewhat pleasant. I honestly kind of came away from it feeling similar-ish. In fact, even a little bit more, the way I did about Slam Dunk Ernest. There were honestly things in Slam Dunk Ernest that annoyed me a little bit more than in this film. I did not find this really, bothersome or offensive. I still don't think it's great. Like I said, I'm still saying I don't know what he means here, but I definitely didn't have as big a problem with it as you did.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then, as we said, this is the final Ernest film. We have reached the end of this project. But before we finish things up, or anything like that, I want to go ahead and really quick, we're gonna kind of give our thoughts on the Ernest films as a whole and then kind of rank them. So, I mean, Lauren, do you want to get us started with this? Like, after sitting down and watching all of these films, what do you ultimately feel about I guess the Ernest franchise, the Worrelliverse itself as it is?
Yeah. Coming into this, I'd as I've said before, really only seen the theatrical films. Had not experienced the direct to video ones.
Right.
I do think I think I said this. I think I had watched Doctor Otto at some point, like earlier in the pandemic.
Right. Mhm.
Maybe. And of course, I had faint memories of Hey Ernest, Ernest.
Sure.
Fond memories of watching the show back as a kid.
Yeah.
Um, uh, kind of the one, and so I didn't expect the direct to video ones to be up to par of the theatrical ones. The one that did at least somewhat surprise me was Ernest Goes to School,
Yeah.
um,
Me too.
which I thought was okay.
Mhm.
The other ones were, you know, possibly worse than I expected them to be.
Okay.
Uh, so that was unencouraging, and of course, Hey Ernest, Ernest did not remotely live up to my memory of it. Rose-colored nostalgia glasses.
Yeah.
The best example of those I've ever had.
Yeah.
So that's my big picture. I don't know if you want me to do a countdown here, or if we want to
No,
go.
we're gonna do that in a second.
Yeah,
I will say, after watching all of these films, I think my ultimate hope is that the people who made these had fun
yeah, that's good.
with them
And I assume
because
they kept making them.
they kept making them.
They kept coming.
And I will say, we've kind of speculated because, Jim Varney did do work outside of this. He had, a starring role in the Beverly Hillbillies movie, in the mid 90s. I believe that was around 94.
Toy Story.
And he had Toy Story, Slinky Dog, so he had a presence, yet he kept choosing to go back to Ernest, kept choosing to work with John Cherry, kept choosing to be a part of these projects. And I really hope that it was because he just really loved playing Ernest and not just because, well, it might not make much money, but it's, I'm hoping that he wasn't in it just for the money. Because number one, there couldn't have been much because they weren't super successful.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really hope that this was just something that he enjoyed this character. He enjoyed working with these people. I ultimately hope that the people who continued working on these films had fun with them. Because unfortunately, there's more bad or middling
Yep.
at best than there is really good.
Yeah.
But yeah, why don't we go ahead now and kind of get into our rankings here. So I guess Lauren, you can go ahead and go first.
Okay.
Do we want to do this one list at a time, or do we want to alternate?
Alternate by number. I'm happy with alternating by number.
Okay.
I do want to start from the bottom, count up.
Yeah, me too. All right. So we have included the 11 projects, not counting the commercial work.
Yeah.
We didn't do that, but counting everything else that we reviewed. Dr. Otto, Hey Ernest, Ernest, all the other Ernest films. We have ranked these from best to worst or worst to best, however you want to. So we're going to start at the bottom at number 11.
Yes.
All right. So Lauren, what is your number 11?
Okay. So just to clarify one point here, because I think this relates to some of our pre-show discussion.
Yes.
In terms of figuring out where to place Hey Ernest, Ernest, I think I want to clarify this up front.
Sure.
I felt like I had to decide whether I want to rank Hey Ernest, Ernest as a 6.5 hour experience or whatever it was, like, or basically try to take an average of the episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, I decided I feel like it fits better. I feel better ranking Hey Ernest, Ernest as sort of just like an average of the episodes. It's like a 22-minute experience rather than as like a 4 hour.
Sure.
So, that's my preface to say that in 11th place at the very end.
Uh-huh.
And maybe this is recency bias. Maybe I'll feel different later. It is Ernest in the Army.
Wow.
It is, yes.
Okay.
Yes. No, this and again, I can't stress enough that like the again there were some beats in there, like the pancake scene,
Yeah.
that I thought could have belonged in a potentially better Ernest in the Army.
Yeah.
There were a couple of stray lines here, but
Sure.
everything else about this script was just a total cluster. And
Yeah.
and I just find it unforgivable. It's like it's not like it was like a very rough script that needed punching up. It's like this didn't need other drafts. This needed to be just thrown out, and just a different script needed to be filmed. Um,
Sure.
it is again maybe it's the fact that I watched this 9 hours ago or something like no that was about 12 hours ago. I watched about 12 hours ago. With a little more distance, maybe watching Ernest Goes to Africa again, I will feel differently. Who knows?
Ugh,
Which I'm not
yeah.
gonna do. Not watching
No.
either of these films again.
Yeah.
But no, it is somehow poetic that my favorite
Yeah.
thing in this film was it ending.
Sure.
That's my number 11 is Ernest in the Army.
Okay. All right. Wow. That really surprises me because I thought for sure that I knew our at least what our bottom two were, but apparently Ernest in the Army snuck in. All right. Well, my number 11 is definitely Hey Vern, It's Ernest. While I found Ernest Goes to Africa more offensive, I feel like I could sit down and watch Ernest Goes to Africa again. I wouldn't enjoy it, but I could sit down and watch it.
Yeah.
I don't think I could make it through even a 22-minute episode, one more episode of this show. It's just, it's so manic and insane, and it's a slog. It's so hard. It's so hard. I would easily watch Ernest Goes to Africa in the background before putting this back on. I can't do it. All right. So what's your number 10 then, Lauren?
My number 10, I ended up giving that, to another recent installment on this show, Ernest Goes to Africa.
Yeah.
It's
my number 10 as well.
It's your number 10 as well. Yeah. I mean, again, we covered it last week. There's just not much to recommend it.
Yeah, no, of all the movies, it is easily the least funny, the most offensive.
Yeah.
It's I mean, you said that there was very little that worked in this movie. It's the same for that.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
That needed, I mean, just like, kind of like Ernest in the Army, there were some decent ideas. In fact, both of them at least had the idea of Ernest as a spy, and neither one of them did it.
With it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of the reason Ernest Goes to Africa edges out Army here for me is that, like I said, if I'm at least going to start with the premise, just the raw premise of Ernest Goes to Africa and Ernest in the Army, Ernest Goes to Africa at least resembles like the structure of a film that I expect to be called Ernest Goes to Africa. That's at least what it does. And like, that's kind of the arc I expect the movie to take.
Yeah.
More or less.
There's actually a lot in both of these movies that are very similar.
Yeah.
Because the love interest in both gets kidnapped and then strung up, and and there's some weirdness, and there's I'm not gonna go in depth.
You reminded me, one of the reasons that Ernest Goes to Africa edges out Army for me is that at least Africa has Linda Cash. Who is in my opinion, at least a stronger performer than anyone else in Army.
No, I mean, that character is not great for her. It's honestly her least interesting character.
Oh, no, it is the least,
but
she's
still she as a performer is more interesting than anybody. Yeah, you're right.
And so she at least, like I said last week, she was at least a good co-lead. She held
Yeah.
this okay with Varney,
Yeah.
and there's no one in Ari. Like I said, I had so much trouble picking a Neldy award for this last one because like, what else am I supposed to do here?
It was tough.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Well, then, yeah, like I said, my number 10 was also Ernest Goes to Africa.
Yep.
Just nothing to promote about that one at all. So Lauren, what's your number 9?
Okay. These next couple are a little bit hazy for me.
Okay.
Because I honestly struggle with where to put Hey Vern, It's Ernest in this.
Okay.
A little bit.
I didn't.
Yeah, you didn't. You
Not at all.
like I said, like I said, I had certain criteria for how I wanted to treat Hey Vern, It's Ernest, and I think like on a 22 episode level, 22
Yeah.
level,
22 minute. Yeah.
22 minute. I'm not sure if I want to go back and watch it, but at least like, despite having watched it, I think like the experience of watching it over and over again was what wore me down. Maybe I'm wrong. So man, I struggle here. This is rough. I almost want to make like a 3-way tie here for the next one because I'm having trouble remembering my strengths.
Just pick one.
Yeah, I'm gonna pick one. Sorry, I'm dragging this out. I'm gonna go ahead and say Slam Dunk Ernest.
That's my number 8 as well.
That's what I had written down here, so I'm just gonna go run with it. Because I honestly, despite the fact we covered this relatively recently, I literally do not remember much of that film, other than the couple of things I didn't like about it.
Yeah, no, there's not. It's not very memorable.
No, it's not. I remember, kind of liking one of the actors in it a little bit.
I was gonna say I like Silk Cozart.
Yeah, Silk. I liked him.
He's, I think, outside of Ernest, the best part about that film. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is there.
Yeah, he shows up. That.
Yeah.
No, there's even Ernest Rides Again, which I'll get to in a second, which annoyed me more. It's like, at least I remember what annoyed me about it. So yeah, Slam Dunk Ernest is the third to last place there. 9, I guess. Yeah.
It's it is number 9. Yeah. It's my number 9 as well. I don't know why I said 8. Yeah. No, it's my number 9 as well. So, and yeah, I don't have a whole lot else to add. It's honestly my 9 and 8 I didn't hate, but I also didn't think that either one of them were good. And the best thing I could say about them is that they were somewhat pleasant.
Yeah.
But they don't really accomplish anything really.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's why I've got Slam Dunk Ernest there.
Yeah.
All right. So then what is your number 8?
All right, number 8. I guess I gotta go ahead and slot Hey Vern, It's Ernest in this place.
Sure.
Again, a lot of what annoyed me about Hey Vern, It's Ernest was the repetition. The individual sketches taken in isolation, weren't terrible. They were better than what we got in some of these subsequent films.
Yeah. I will say this about Hey Vern, It's Ernest. I think when you first watch it, watching one episode is okay. It's not great, but it's okay. Even watching anytime. Watching any amount of them back to back is definitely where it gets bad. But honestly, after watching all 13, I never want to see another one again.
No, that's fair. That's fair. And I'll be honest, I'm torn with, again, how much I'm just was spoiled by watching all of them. How much it just hurt my opinion of wanting to ever rewatch any of them, which I don't. But the at least a couple of high points that were in there were probably better than the high points of what's coming up in my next position. So, but for the sake of ranking that, I'll put it there at 8. What about you?
Okay. My number 8 is Ernest in the Army.
Yep.
I didn't love it. Like I said, I didn't hate it. It was honestly just kind of there. There were a lot of problems with the story, but honestly, that's the case for a lot of these. Even some of the best Ernest films have some story problems.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just there wasn't a lot in this that made me like really love it, really excited or anything like that. There were a couple of decent gags, but that was about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't enough to put it above anything else.
Yeah. All right. Then coming in at number 7.
7. Yes, we
Uh,
are on our number 7s.
This is where I'm going to put Ernest Rides Again.
Okay.
I did. I'm surprised it ranked this high. That just speaks
Okay.
to how bad these subsequent films were.
I was about to say, because honestly, I feel like you were the most pissed off about this one and that one.
Yeah, but part of it, I think, looking back on it, is that Ernest Rides Again is just such a steep drop off from the previous ones.
Sure.
And I still hate how much of time was wasted there. But after seeing some of these subsequent films, I look back on it, and now I can contrast it with, again, Africa and Army. And again, I didn't love the characters, but again, Linda Cash, she's in it. She's doing okay. They don't give her much to do, but she's there and she's fine.
Yeah.
Our vacuum boys, again, didn't
Mighty
love
Work
them, but they
Nope.
were characters, and they were doing something in that film.
Again, I appreciate the performers.
Yeah.
Maybe not the performance, but
Yeah.
the performers.
Abner, again, kind of annoying, but again, he stood out looking back. It's better than what the latter films gave him. So just by default of being better than these other things, that's where
Yeah.
Rides Again ends up falling.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. All right. Well, my number 7 is Dr. Otto and the Riddle of the Gloom Beam. I had not seen this film before the podcast. In fact, I think it is the only one that I had not seen any of before this podcast. I didn't realize that at the time. But yeah, it is, I think, the only one that I had not seen any of. And again, it's not bad. They're trying some interesting things here, but I don't think ultimately they really know what they're trying to say. And there's some great images, some great, performance. It's a great Jim Varney performance.
Yep.
But the film itself is a mess. It's just an absolute mess. And I do have to give it kudos for, I do ultimately feel like they were trying to say something with this film. The problem is, I don't know what they were trying to say, and I ultimately don't think they know what they were trying to say. So yeah. I just couldn't put it much higher.
yeah. Okay. Well, in my next slot up for 6,
It's number
yep,
6, yeah.
that's where I have Dr. Otto.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
you and I actually switched because my 6 is rides again.
I thought, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
No, basically you've covered the ground there with Dr. Otto just a second ago. It ranks a little higher for me simply because, again, Varney gives a lot of interesting performances in it. It's simply sort of a bigger showcase for what he's doing in different characters. And so I appreciated that. I'm also admittedly kind of grading it a little bit on like a Mystery Science Theater curve, I imagine.
Sure.
It is
Well, I mean, also, I didn't mention in that, I mean, not to say any of the production in the later films was stellar.
Yeah.
Especially the ones outside of, the direct to DVD video, whatever ones. But the production, especially the sound, is so bad.
Oh, it's so bad.
The sound and the lighting in that one scene.
Yeah.
It's really bad.
But like I said, I'm grading it on a curve. It's the first film for these people. They're working on a very limited budget. So I know what they have to work with and accept it for what it is. So yeah, that's where Otto falls for me. And you said you had Ernest Rides Again.
Yeah, Ernest Rides Again is my number 6. Again, I remember as a kid really enjoying this movie, and I thought that it was going to be in my top 5. Rewatching it, that there was a lot more that didn't work than I remembered. And there were a lot of the combination of the Mighty Work Boys and Linda Cash's character Nan was just not a great combination. Again, love the performers. Just unfortunately, the way it was written, those performances just don't go together.
Yeah.
They were good, I think, as a whole, on their own, good performances. They just, when you put them together, there's nothing to like.
Yeah.
That's a problem. But I still, as absurd as it is, love the idea of seeing Ernest rolling down the street on a cannon. There's some decent gags. He even gets a decent scene or two out of Abner. This is in that period that, even though the film around him might not be great, Varney could elevate it. And that, to me, aside from the fact that I do still have a bit of nostalgia for it, is what brought this up to my number 6.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But yeah, and I will say, I'm pretty sure I can guess your number 5. I'm pretty sure it's the same as mine.
Maybe. I don't know. I was in an interesting position here for these.
Okay.
Partly because we're getting into ones I actually have some nostalgia for.
I was going to say, yeah, because we are now in our top 5.
Yeah.
But I will be surprised if yours is not the same as mine, just considering what's left.
Okay. Well, I mean, let's see your reaction, because crud. Even as I sit here, I'm starting to reconsider, but
okay,
I'll go with what I wrote down earlier.
Okay.
Which is that I put Ernest Goes to Jail at number 5.
Okay, that does surprise me.
Surprise you, yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I saw Jail growing up. And so I had nostalgia for it. I went into this thinking, and so part of this is me watching the film now and just being like, that didn't live up to my memory of it.
Sure.
I admit that's part of my thinking here. And part of it also just being the recurring electromagnetism thing that I did not like on a revisit.
Sure.
So I honestly don't have much more to say about it. That's part of the problem. It's just like, I like Jim Varney as Nash in that film.
Agreed.
Yeah, part of I think part of it, again, coming back to this tomorrow, maybe thinking about it more, I would reorder these a little bit, maybe. But at least for tonight, I put Jail at 5 just because it didn't live up to my own memory of it.
All right. Well, my number 5 is Ernest Goes to School. This is, in my opinion, easily the best of the lesser, we say direct to DVD, but technically it had a theatrical run, as did Rides Again. But
the post Touchstone films.
Yes, exactly. The independent, the M Shell Productions ones, as you say, post Touchstone. I think this is the best of those, and it's still not great. There are, like we said when we reviewed the film, there are a lot of things that don't make sense, that don't pay off. A lot of just throwing characters that we don't know into positions where we feel like we should know who these people are. Not explaining things, setting up one thing for a character, and then they end up being fulfilling a completely different idea. Suddenly characters that we saw just kind of hinted at are suddenly one of Ernest's best friends. Okay. Just some silliness, some bad development on the script, but out of all of them, it was the one with some of the most solid Ernest gags, some of the better scenes going on within this framework, and ultimately one of the more likable stories.
Yeah.
Obviously, I had some problems with it, but you know, I do think that it is the best of those later films.
Yes. And I do agree with that,
Okay.
which is why I myself have Ernest Goes to School at number 4.
Okay.
So I
All right.
like
I figured if it wasn't your 5, it had to be at least your 4.
exactly. And like I
Yeah.
said, given more time to reflect, maybe I would swap these two, feel differently. Part of what influences me on this, aside from the nostalgia angle of it,
Mhm.
is that I do still kind of feel like Ernest Goes to School is a better directed film than most of what John Cherry has done. And it's kind of subtle in it, but I appreciate that, and I kind of want to give it credit. Again, Linda Cash turns in a good performance. Bill Burge is in the film,
Yes.
doing a good job.
Agreed. And
Um,
honestly, Ernest Goes to School, I think, would be, especially of the films that we've already mentioned, the easiest one to fix.
yes,
I really think had that script gotten a couple more drafts, that it actually could have been even better.
no, again, the structure of that film is fine. As opposed to
Yeah.
like I said, like Army has no structure at all. Like no, the structure of Ernest Goes
Sure.
to School is fine. It basically just needs punch up work by and large,
Yeah, they need to establish characters that they want us to think are important.
true, but that also in that case might just be an editing thing for all I know. Like
True.
I almost get the feeling like that was there in the script and just didn't make it in the final cut.
But then there's the whole idea of Maisie being a love interest, and then all of a sudden she's their best friend.
Oh, again, that needs to be fixed. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's a minor tweak.
Yeah.
Really, but yeah, that's where I put Ernest Goes to School number
Okay.
number 4.
All right. All right. So my number 4 is actually Ernest Scared Stupid. As we discussed on our as we talked about this film, it's a lot more clumsy than I remembered it being. There are a lot more story problems, but when you compare it to some of the later films, even Ernest Goes to School, the story problems here don't seem nearly as big as some of those other ones. So comparatively, it can still be at number 4.
Yeah.
But there's also some iconic imagery. The trolls in this are, top notch
Yeah.
effects. And it obviously there's some great Ernest gags. It's we at least get Bill Burge in the film. We unfortunately don't get Gaylord Sartain, but we do get Bill Burge. And that, and everything else that goes along with Eartha Kitt. There's still some great things about this film.
Yeah. I myself have Ernest Scared Stupid at my number 3.
Okay.
I'll co-sign a bunch of that stuff to keep things moving here. And
Sure.
basically, it's just Eartha Kitt elevates the film. The film is simply better because she is in it,
And she's not in it as much as I remembered her
she's
being.
not. No, she
No.
really isn't. But
No.
just every moment she's on screen, she makes this a better film.
Yeah.
And at least in that respect, whereas Ernest Goes to Jail felt like it suffered a little bit upon my memory. Ernest Scared Stupid more or less met it. So I get fond memories in the family of that film. So it's at my number 3.
Okay. All right. My number 3 is actually Ernest Goes to Jail. I again found more problems than I remembered there being as a kid. But it's still, there's some solid jokes in here. This is one of the 2 that actually does have Gaylord Sartain and Bill Burge. We've got Chuck and Bobby in full strength.
Mhm.
You know, we've got the double role by Jim Varney playing an excellent villain.
Yeah.
You know, and there's also, we haven't really mentioned, but there's something to be said for a good Jackie Welch performance. She gets to play the judge in this one.
Yeah.
This is during the time of kind of that peak Varney stuff. So for me, this had to be in the top, you know, 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So yeah, just fun film, has its problems, but I think it's fun enough to pull it through.
Yeah. Now that gets us to the top 2. And I have on my
Right,
gut
which we apparently, and I'm sure that we're flipped, but
I'm
we
sure
have
we're
the same 2.
We have the same 2. That's
Yeah.
what's left over, but I think you're right.
Yeah.
So because I have at my number 2, Ernest Goes to Camp,
Which is my number 1.
which is your number 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've said it before, and I'll just be on, a lot of it is nostalgia. It's the first one I remember seeing. It is the one that has stuck with me the most.
Yeah.
I will say though, on rewatching, one of the things that I do really appreciate is that it is one of the films that is trying the most stuff.
Yep.
It is the most different. It's the most different tone. It is, in my opinion, easily the one that is taken the most seriously.
Yep.
There's some pretty dark moments in this film. You know, that I think honestly work pretty well, even darker than Ernest finding out that he's going to the electric chair.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, that's at least treated more seriously than, you know, Ernest in the army or Ernest Goes to Africa.
No, and interestingly, it does show that one, that Varney has the acting chops to pull this off,
Yeah,
but also that he can still
absolutely.
do it. He can pull off that sort of sincere, quiet, sad moment with Ernest.
Yeah.
Through the character of Ernest P. Worrell, which up until that point you really wouldn't think he'd be able to do. He's a commercial pitch man.
Yeah.
But
Jim Varney is an actor.
Yeah.
A really good actor.
Yeah.
And so he's able to pull those emotions out of you
Mhm.
with a character like Ernest.
Yep.
And then of course, you know, there's of course the song, you know,
Yeah.
the only one that we get Jim Varney singing
Mhm.
in. And you know, I wish there had been more, but you know, maybe it just didn't work out for one reason or another. But yeah, that's why I just, while I can be honest and say that I think objectively the best one made probably is Ernest Saves Christmas.
which is my number 1.
Yeah, of course. There's still something about this one that, like I said, I like that they're swinging for the fences. They're trying something different. They're trying a different tone than any of the other Ernest movies, and in my opinion, it works.
Yeah.
I think it works.
And yeah, to talk about my number 1 for a moment, Ernest Saves Christmas. I think we noted back at the time, we stumbled across the fact that it appeared that this script may have originally been written not having Ernest in it. And
Yeah.
Ernest P. Worrell kind of gets grafted into it.
Which I think is part of the reason that I think it is the strongest story.
I think you may be right. Exactly.
Unfortunately.
So, but it does work. He's grafted onto it well. He feels like a natural part of the script.
Agreed.
And so, yeah, incidentally, it ends up as, a stronger script for that reason. But also, more so than any other film, it's just Varney, not only himself getting to be a talented actor on screen, but he is surrounded by a solid cast of other talented actors.
Yeah.
So, he's not sharing the screen with some
Santa, Harmony Star.
Yeah. There's Douglas Seal there next to him.
Yeah.
Who is just killing it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's just solid all around. The comedy bits are good. We have both Chuck and Bobby in the film with a good little side comedy bit.
Yep.
It's perfectly good for them. It's well served. Yeah, it's just my favorite of the bunch.
Yeah, and like I said, I think it's hard to argue objectively that it's not the strongest film.
Yeah,
It's just I can't call it my favorite.
sure.
It's
Absolutely.
my number 2. So, it's right there, but I have a special place for Ernest Goes to Camp.
Yeah.
I will say, and I kept meaning to talk about this, the joke was always, that all of the films were Ernest Goes to. There's really only like 3 or 4 of those out of what, like 10 films?
Well, it's Ernest Goes to Camp, Ernest Goes to Jail,
Yes.
Ernest Goes to School, and Ernest Goes to Africa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those 4.
4.
Which I will say, I wasn't completely. I mean, I guess technically it makes more sense to say Ernest in the Army, but I was like, why didn't they call it Ernest Goes to the Army?
Eh.
I mean, I'm not saying that they had. I'm just like, we've made a brand,
Yes.
and it would have worked. It would have made sense.
Yes.
And
Oh,
it's not like
is.
anybody is looking for correct grammar from an Ernest movie.
I have told this to you off mic before.
Yeah.
So we can put the link in the credits. I'll make sure to send it to you.
Yeah.
I may have mentioned it in a previous broadcast that I had gotten I had procured from the Reagan Library, the Reagan
Yes.
Presidential Library, audio of when
Mhm.
Jim Varney visited the White House press room in 1986.
Yes.
That had not previously been public, but I got them to release that. They had already had photos that were taken of Jim Varney's visit. I collated all that together into a little 10-minute video that I put up on YouTube, which I titled Ernest Goes to the White House.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have said Ernest in the White House.
I could have, but Ernest Goes to the White House was funny.
Yeah, and it's more on brand.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yep. So, yeah, we'll drop a link to that for anyone who wants to check it out.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that I think is about it. Lauren, anything else that you want to say about this before we kind of close out this project?
It's been a fun inaugural podcasting experience for me to spend the last year plus really going through all this.
It's right at a year.
Yeah.
This is honestly, I think we are actually recording this in July. I think this is about the time last year when I asked you if you wanted to do this.
Oh, no.
Was it earlier?
No, I think we started April of last year. I could be wrong because
no, the first episode went out in September of last year.
The first episode went in September.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, maybe I'm backwards then.
Pretty sure.
Because we covered 11 things there, and then we also did we had 9 movies plus Dr. Otto plus Hey Ernest Ernest plus we did a commercial episode.
Yeah.
So
yes, 12 episodes in total. This is our 12th.
Okay. Well then, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I guess we did start roughly a year ago, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because this will drop in August.
Well then,
So yeah.
Okay. So yeah, no, it's been fun doing this the past year. It occurred to me a second ago. There's been one tiny little lasting influence on me, which is really petty and arbitrary. But watching the old commercials of Jim Varney and him being a pitchman for Mellow Yellow, I've had more Mellow Yellow lately.
Oh really?
Yeah. They have it in the dispensers at like Arby's and occasionally at Zaxby's. It's just like, you know what I feel like? Mellow Yellow.
Yeah, occasionally those weird, annoying ads do work.
Yeah,
I listened to a podcast that does a commercial for, of all things, Keebler Sandies, and when they brought them up, number one, they add enough to make the commercial uniquely them.
Yeah.
Now I've heard it 5 million times, so I'm not nearly as enchanted by it. But the first couple hundred times I heard it, I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. And I actually was like, you know what? Sounds pretty good. I think I'll get some Keebler Sandies.
Yeah. I'll also say that this experience, particularly one episode, uh, brought home to me
Mm,
just how strong the nostalgia goggles effect can be.
yeah.
Which is, of course, Hey Vern, it's Ernest. Because that was a show for years I just had kind of fond memories about. I owned it on DVD. I wasn't going to revisit it exactly, but it's sitting there. I figured if I ever did, it it probably wouldn't live up to my memory, but it
No.
fine. Um, but no, no.
No.
Instead,
No.
Hey Vernon's Ernest has possibly beaten out both of my previous two high-ranking examples of nostalgic properties from my childhood, which did not retain their position
Yeah.
that it held in my memory,
Yeah.
which were incidentally to tangent off momentarily.
Yeah.
The 1990s X-Men cartoon,
Mm.
which while the theme song still slaps, I revisited that back I think after X-Men 2 came out and watched like some of the better again 20 years ago now, but rewatched some of those episodes. It's like, man, this is not great. Like this is only 10 years old at this point. It's like
Yeah.
these episodes, Batman has aged much better than this has.
Oh yeah.
This like even the animation is loud is not great. The voice acting is not great. Like this,
Mm.
why did I like why was this appointment viewing when I came home from school?
That's X-Men.
Yeah. So X-Men,
And I mean that
yeah.
that theme's pretty good.
No, the theme song is still great. And also speaking of the shows that weren't great with at least decent theme songs, the other nostalgia goggles example was when I was even smaller kid. Like one of the first cartoons I ever watched was the Wuzzles, Disney's the Wuzzles.
Oh.
Yes, it was one of Disney's first forays into animation, like
Mm.
television animation. To be clear.
Yeah.
Turns out it only
Yeah.
lasts 13 episodes, I think.
Oh, well, there you go.
But nope, I watched a clip of it. It's like I was like 8, but man, this is actively not good. I understand why this lasted 13 episodes.
Yeah.
It's the sort of thing like having your childhood stuff on YouTube can teach you.
Yeah.
So yeah, but those were two previous ones. This is the first time I've actually sat down to rewatch an entire bit of childhood nostalgic property.
Yeah.
And yeah, man,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
teaches you lessons. This is what having what did Patton Oswalt call like everything ever created available forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, having that kind of stuff available to revisit just
Not always good.
not
Yeah.
great. Yeah,
No.
not great.
All
Bob.
right. Well, I do want to go ahead and wrap this up.
Yes.
Obviously, we want to remind everyone, I'm assuming, if you're hearing this, you're on the Patreon, you know all about it. Patreon.com/theflyingcow. All sorts of exclusive things. Make sure to check out all of the other shows that we do, as well as the YouTube channel, things like that. But I also want to go ahead and announce that with this project wrapping up, I had already been talking to Lauren about possibly doing something else after this. And I went through a couple of different ideas and, had even mentioned them to Lauren, but wasn't sold. And wouldn't you know it, Lauren himself actually brought up the idea for doing this merely out of the fact that he told me that he had never seen this show before. So, for our next project, we are going to be doing a review, rewatch, or watch for the first time in Lauren's case, the entire series of Avatar the Last Airbender in a show that I like to call Comets and Cabbages. That's right. We are going to be reviewing every single episode, book 1, book 2, book 3, every single one of them. And I'm going to be introducing them to Lauren. We're going to be talking about them. And I believe the plan right now is to be releasing one a week. Because there's a lot there and we want to try to get through it in, a manageable amount of time. So we're going to be doing that. That is going to be taking the place of this podcast. So it will be coming out on the Patreon, like I said, once a week. So make sure to look out for that. I'm really looking forward to that. It's going to be a lot of fun. But like I said, this is the end of this podcast. So I want to go ahead and thank you, Lauren, of course, for doing this with me. It was just on a whim. I was like, you know what? I feel like I should ask Lauren. I feel like he might be interested in this. And look at that. You said yes. And it's been a fun ride, a very interesting ride at times. But I appreciate you going along with it with me. And also want to thank all of our listeners who have gotten through this as well. Like I said, an interesting time for us all. But like I said, we will be signing off of this podcast. So until next time, moo. Know what I mean?